Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? All right. Oh, great. Good to hear. Bloody lovely that. Oh yeah. Good week, was it? Brilliant. Lovely. I don't have anything else to add to that, apart from welcome to Something About Rhyme, episode, I think 5, series 2, I would have thought. Today's hangover is brought to you by, I think, Heineken and possibly a mixture of, oh no, it was Carlsberg Export. A fine beer with a hell of a heart. I'm joined today by a young chap called Jack Harris, who is a folk musician, as well as my brother-in-law, if I'm honest, to be, not yet. He's a very clever guy, poetry enthusiast, pop and all kind of music enthusiast, and someone who I talk to about this kind of thing that we talk about on the podcast a lot, but not exactly in the same way, because it's not from a rap point of view, it's from a different point of view. So that's who he is. Introduce yourself if you want, Jack. You go for it, mate. I believe in you. You can do everything.
Okay, yes. So hello, I am Jack Harris. That's correct. And basically all that other stuff you said is also accurate. So
we're good.
Yeah.
So we've done the fact checking.
Yeah, not really much to add to that. That's all. That is all the case.
So yeah. We're going to have a little chat, but first of all, I am going to go through the quiz from last week. Now, Jack, I think I've given you one of these quizzes before. Do you remember the sort of like the ryming ones?
I do. Yes. It was. I think I was vexed by quite a bit of it, but let's have it.
You weren't bad. You weren't bad.
Maybe I've improved.
I'll give you a short time limit because otherwise these do drag on. But
all right, fair enough.
Right, I'll go. Number 1 was wood pigeon, and the clue was by wood pigeon.
Too early for thought.
Right, it was good riddance.
Good riddance. Good riddance. Yeah, okay. That's a freebie. Crack on.
You can have that. Next one is woolly jumper, and the clue was clones. I think that's quite a tricky one. I think that took quite a few people a while to get. Woolly jumper and clones.
Woolly jumper. Hang on, which one's the clue?
Woolly jumper is the rhyme and clones is the clue.
Clones is the clue. Woolly jumper.
It's sort of like metaphorically clones. Well, I'm giving you this. It's cookie cutter.
Oh, yeah. I had Blade Runner in my head for some reason. It's not accurate. Anyway.
And then sugar baby, and the clue was accident. So the rhyme is sugar baby, the clue was accident. And I'll give you a little extra clue. What do you say when you have an accident? That rhymes with sugar baby.
Oh, this is poor.
This is why I wanted you hung over on it.
Yeah, no, I can. Sugar baby. Oh,
right, it was Whoopsie Daisy.
Oh yeah,
got you. Sugar baby, and then all right, you'll like this one. Pointillism.
Oh, yes.
And the clue is band, as in BAND. So what's a band that rhymes with pointillism? From the 90s, I'd say. I think one of my favourite bands. Love will tear us apart.
Oh, Joy Division.
Joy Division, pointillism.
Joy Division's late 70s, my friend. Late 70s.
Are they?
Yes.
Oh, fuck about.
Yeah.
I don't want checking all through this, all right? If I say something...
That's just gospel? Okay, yeah. Fine.
So the mid-90s, was it? Yeah. Was it the mid-90s?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's it.
That's right, yeah.
All right.
After one of that year's big releases, along with Frank Sinatra's Wee Small Hours and Pasha Bell's Canon.
That's it. Well. Just at the same time. Contemporaries. All right. Poisonous fish. And the clue was, didn't mean to say that. Oh, I didn't mean to say that. It was a poisonous fish. All right, that's Freudian slip.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
I want you to get one. I know you can get one. I reckon it will happen. All right.
I'm not sure. This is 0 from 5 so far.
This one's tricky. So this one's Taoism, and the clue is speakers. Taoism. Speakers is in like what a DJ has, not a narrator.
And It rhymes with Taoism.
Yeah. You have
Yeah.
to break it up a bit. The syllables they're all there, but you have to sort of like.
Oh, sound system.
Hey, there you go.
Great. Okay, great.
All
There we
right.
go.
And that's the real quiz, and we're done now.
That's the real quiz. That is the real quiz. That is also lunch.
All right, I'm going to go through the last ones. Right, so
Go on.
the next one is Morticia, and it was accoladed person, and the answer was award winner. Then it was water python, and the clue was place. And I had Northern Ireland. I was picked up on that perhaps there's an extra syllable in Ireland sometimes, like Ireland. But I think colloquially you kind of say Northern Ireland. So, but someone else had Orkney Islands, which I also kept. That was good.
Also good.
And then poor condition, the clue was living thing. That was organism. And then last one for you, Jack. Here we go. Forcing a smile, and the clue was free spirit. Forcing a smile, and the clue is free spirit.
Forcing a smile. Oh God, no.
Forcing a smile.
Oh, Born to Be Right. Very good. Born to Be Right.
I thought I'd done such a shit job of doing that.
I just thought you were having a moment there. These crazy boys get the tasers. The pressure's gotten to him.
Anyway, here we are. Just a couple of boys.
That was I'm disappointed with myself in that performance, but I was happy with. I'll cling to sound system, which I think in many respects was the most difficult. And
I think it was.
And thus rewarding of all of them. So that's what I'll tell everybody who brings me up on the rest. Which I think in many respects I sort of let slide only to get to.
Yeah, I think you deserve 10 out of 10 based on that.
I mean, me too, really. Morally, certainly.
So yeah. I wanted to get you on this little thing, which is all about rhyme and all about, more broad than that, I suppose. Like it's about rhyme as sort of like the core focus and how rhyme is important, not only in music and rap battling, obviously what I do, but also just in many different ways in poetry and memory and learning and all those kind of things. And it's sort of like a celebration of rhyme, but we also talk about writing more generally and songwriting and lyric writing and that kind of thing, which is something you've been doing now for, well over coming up to 2 decades, I guess. It must be coming to that point.
Yeah, it is. Good Lord.
And folk writing or folk songwriting is very different to rapping, obviously, a million different ways. One of which being that it's generally more sparse. There will be fewer words on the whole used in a folk song compared to a rap song because of just the how quickly you go through rap, and that's generally not the case. That you don't rush through a folk song. It's slow and it's measured and it's metered and there's nice repetition and those kind of things. So when you're writing a folk song, where do you start? For you personally, where's the starting point? Is it based around a lyric or a chorus or a song title? What's usually the sort of like the nugget?
Yeah, well, it's usually, but I would say for a start, to pick you up on a few things here. No, I don't sit down to write a folk song necessarily, but rather just a song. If it takes, and whatever form it takes. I suppose, ultimately I am interested in that particular genre, and so if it comes out resembling that, that's just because that's what I've listened to a lot of, I suppose. But the idea is just to write it as a song. And where does that start? That usually starts with an idea, more than a melody or a narrative or anything of that nature. It's usually just an idea, like I don't know, my song. I have a song called "Vanished Birds," which was just that. It was the idea was that any number of extinct birds had come back to life for a moment and then disappeared. So that's. The journey is usually there, an idea, sometimes a line, which in that sense begats an idea. I'm struggling to think of an example, but it's usually something quite small is my point. It's an idea or a line or more occasionally, perhaps a little melodic phrase. If one comes first, it'll be the music, and then maybe a little melodic phrase will then suggest something, and you sort of unpack from there. Really, it's a case then of following your intuition and thinking through, setting the idea in play. It's really what I like to do. That idea then gets put into form, and which includes rhyme, of course, most of the time.
So yeah, rhyme is one of those things where it's sort of like it's two things at once. It's a limitation in a sense, in that most of us adhere to it when writing lyrics and things like that. Most of us do, and so we feel like we need to have it. But it's also a technique as well. Like, it does serve a purpose, and so it's sort of like almost a hindrance and almost a gift at the same time.
Yeah, but it also is a, I don't know if you'd agree with this or if you found this to be the case. It's also a tremendous. It leads to ideas in and of itself. In a very simple way, the poet Norman McCaig said this, just in a very basic level, that the process of thinking up a rhyme for whatever your preceding line was can lead you to new avenues of thought, new ideas. The word that rhymes with the previous word might have a whole semantic field attached to it, or a whole legion of ideas attached to it that can, so the rhyme can actually guide the song in that regard.
100%. I think it's really, it seems really fortuitous when that happens, because I don't know if your sort of songwriting is the same, but in rap it's traditionally we always say you work backwards. You have like a punchline, which is like if you're on a rhyme scheme, you will have your last line figured out, and then you work backwards and fill in the blanks. And so we're working usually away from an idea rather than to an idea. So, but sometimes obviously you that changes, and you start with an idea and you see where it leads. And but that I would say, I was talking to someone last week, and he was saying, that's something probably a more advanced rap writer would do, is start with an idea and see where it leads and sort of go down the avenues and stuff. And the amount of times I've been writing and I've found, I'm working towards a punchline, or, the payoff line or whatever. And then you realize that the rhyme that you've found by complete chance sort of trumps the one that you're going to, or the idea that you found in, halfway through, that should be more of a sort of throwaway, just leading to a setup to get to the punchline, is better than the thing that you're working towards.
That's right.
So you have to restructure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think that's sort of letting the form guide. That's with a lovely kind of intuitive. I put an extra syllable in there for some reason. It's one of those days. An intuitive portion of writing kicks in, where you, as much as you're consciously thinking something through, you can also then, if you yield somewhat, you can let the form sort of dictate its own course in a way.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of mystical. It's not supposed to. It's just something that form will do, I think. Writing away from it. What about though when you're freestyling or improvising? Surely then you don't have an endpoint.
Well, it's interesting because good freestylers will think of a punchline and then fill in the time until they get to it. So especially in freestyle battle rap, for example, where like it's all based, it has to be punchline led. So you have to look at someone and think, okay, this person's wearing Kappa. I'm going to say that's, old school jeans or something like that, old school clothes. And so that's the thing, but you wouldn't start with that, because then you've blown your beans, and then you have to rush to find, what rhymes with old school clothes that can be better than what you started with. So it has to go like, don't use those old school clothes. Like, it has to build to it like that.
Right.
So but it all happens on a dime. It happens as quick as possible. So it's a different thing. But then when I freestyle, which I'm really bad at, I always end up starting with an idea, like the first sound that comes to my head, I'll say, and then I'll go, shit, what do I say next? And then it starts getting into this weird story that leads nowhere, and there's no end point. So then it's bad. So you do have to have an end point, even when you're freestyling, even if it's just something that you've quickly thought up. Because I think freestyling is almost sort of like, it's a misnomer sometimes. The idea is that you're saying things literally as they occur in your brain, but there's still a plan. Usually there's still, like, you're thinking ahead. You're not thinking of it as it's happening. You're thinking ahead to the next bit, and then you're just sort of working on autopilot until you can get there, I think. So
right. Cool. Yeah.
But is that the same in the way that you write? Do you write to something or from something, or is it just more like
Again, it all depends. That can be the case if there is an end point in mind. I think when you have that, the risk is not to get there too quickly, in a sense, because you want you risk filler then, just having holding lines. And if you have this great ending, my old friend who you met, Eric Taylor, the late great, has a fantastic song called Shoes, which is a man, he's sort of describing the course of his life through the various outfits that he has, and in this brooding and strange way. And the punchline, well, the culmination of the song essentially is that the narrator is dead. He's in his funeral outfit.
Right.
It's a great ending, and the temptation would be, if you have that sort of twist, that sort of denouement, would be to rush towards it. But it was, testament to Eric that everything else in that song is great too. The verses are, each one is full of as much intrigue as that last one, but still having the cumulative effect of getting to that twist. Sometimes I have an endpoint in mind, for sure. Other times perhaps not so much. And the rhyme, sometimes a rhyme can tell you when to end it if you have a great finishing point. I'll give you, for example, a song that I'm about to release, actually, called Bells, which you might remember. I've played that a few times. That very much, I realized the ending to that song as I wrote it. I could have gone on. The last line of that song, it drops off in the middle of a verse. The last verse is incomplete. It ends with the line, "In that moment, I knew what I was feeling." Now, with the rest of that verse, you could explain that, what the feeling was. But it suddenly occurred to me, if I end it there, with knowledge of what I'm feeling rather than explaining it, then it's far more satisfying.
Right.
It implies rather than tells, and that occurred to me in the moment of doing it. So there was no end point in mind necessarily. I just came up with that line. Went, that would be a good place to end it. So sometimes it very much depends. There's another story I like a lot about when John Hyatt was writing a song called Tennessee Plates, which is a kind of classic American blues rock caper. Really, it's about a guy who, a good time gambler, robber baron type of guy who ends up on the run, and it brings in Elvis and rock and roll and whatnot. They were looking for a Cadillac with Tennessee plates. That's the car in which he goes on the run. And every verse ends with that line. They're trying to find a Cadillac with Tennessee plates. And he says that there's a co-writer's credit on that song. He was stuck with how to end the song. And the guy said, well, obviously, a friend of his said, your character needs to end up arrested, of course. How about he ends up in a prison making Tennessee plates, which is what they do in American prisons.
That's nice.
Yeah, so he didn't have that in mind, but someone else's input, when it's perfectly in keeping with the hook, and it's just a nice way to, I'm stamping out my time making Tennessee plates. It's great.
That's really nice, yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. But really, I think maybe endpoints, that's really interesting, writing to an endpoint. I suppose, in all honesty, no, I do that less, having an ending in mind.
So in that, if that is the case, if you're sort of like going through and working out the idea that you have the nugget, you have the sort of capsule of what the idea is at the beginning, and then you sort of start to flesh out ideas, and then you come against rhyme, in a sense. Like, you have to start explaining yourself within the limitations of meter and timing and rhyme. Yeah. What's that process like for you? Is it quite like, because I think for a lot of rap writers, it's quite a methodical thing of going, right, I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna do da 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 da, and then then sitting for hours and being like, how am I especially since it's multisyllabic a lot of the time, there's like quite a lot of thought going into how am I going to word this in a specific way and get to the rhyme. Whereas I guess when you have fewer limitations, because the rhyme is more traditional in most of the writing that you do, it's more sort of like, it's not like long strings of needless silliness, it's just usually one syllable at the end. How is that for you? Like, do you feel like that's something you sit down and think on for ages, like, how am I going to rhyme this, or does it usually happen quite organically?
No, again, every now and again I feel like I get a little gift where there's this organic just kind of, oh, everything flows very naturally. But no, on the whole, the writing of lyrics, period, is pretty meticulous. It's the bit that takes the longest. And suddenly with rhyme, I think there's, how do I put this? Rhymes in just on themselves are beautiful and satisfying if they're done well. And it's and also it's the, so there's a pleasure to be found in just the loveliness of a rhyme. Bob Dylan's new record has, I think I mentioned this recently, has a rhyme. He says, I'm going to teach you to play piano like Leon Russell, like Liberace, or John the Apostle, St. John the Apostle. So rhyming Leon Russell with John the Apostle is just, it's gorgeous. It's you know, and it's a surprise. Rhyme, when you have a rhyme scheme like that too, there is always that aspect that's similar to a joke, where you have a setup and then the delivery of the rhyme gives you that kind of the same sort of relief, or the same sort of
the tension breaking.
As a punchline would do. At the same time, I think so. I'm trying for that sort of effect. I'm also very conscious of the capacity of rhyme to link meaning, to forge chains of meaning.
That's one of the most significant things we think of in rap as well. It's one of the, it's sort of like the holy grail. Like, how can you link these two things thematically, or, you know, making them sound natural as well, but also having them, you know, within the same semantic field, or, you know, using an antonym or something like that to really, you know, get the most out of rhyme.
Absolutely. And Leonard Cohen calls rhyme sonic coincidence.
Nice.
And I think it's just lovely, isn't it? Yeah, and I think in that, but then, and coincidence is it really, because often you do get the rhyming of certain words, certain lines can carry meaning in and of itself. Another favorite, Dylan again, actually, another favorite example of mine, not to drag Bob into this entirely, but it is an example of a kind of rhyme that I'm really fond of. I don't even know if it has a name. If it did, it would probably be something like homonymic rhyming. Basically, when you rhyme the word with itself. Which is, on the one hand, not a rhyme. It's paradox, really. On the one hand, it's not a rhyme, but on the other hand, it's entirely a rhyme. Nothing can rhyme more with a word than itself.
This is literally. I did an episode about this about a month ago. It was all the times I could find that happening throughout, you know, rap and pop and things like that. And there's two different kinds. There's like, for example, there's War Pigs by Black Sabbath, and the first line he says, "Generals gather at their masses, just like witches at black masses," and that's just
that's pretty good.
It's just rhyming the same word with itself, but there's like a slight difference in the way it's used and things like that.
A different in meaning, yes.
But there are some times when it's used more like a simile or play on words, like more playful, where you know, I'm trying to think of an example now. Well, for example, I remember there's this is a weird example. It's certainly not Dylan-esque, but there's a rap battler called Luna C, and I remember he said,
see what he's done there.
he was against this guy, and he said, this is a version of this. It's a homonym, and it's really clever actually. He said like something like, in that relationship, she to avoid the risk of pregnancy, she took away your balls, or something like that, or like I can't remember, something about not getting pregnant, and hysterectomy. So so it's hysterectomy. So when it comes to paying the checks, pay his direct to me. So it's like it's the word again, but it's his direct to me. So it's like a mosaic rhyme against hysterectomy as a whole rhyme, but it's also every single syllable is taken to a different meaning. So it's, there's that version as well, where it's not even a word for a word; it's a collection of words put together to sound exactly the same as another word, which is very cool.
That's a lovely technique as well. I've heard some good ones. I've heard you can get rhymes for orange out of that. I've heard there's a song I like where when he leaves, he looks at the line, which doesn't make sense without context, but just for the purposes of rhyme.
Yeah.
Says, it looks a bit like Agent Orange, and when he leaves, he bangs the door in just about that time.
Oh, door in just, Yeah, that's
just
nice.
about, and then Jean Beaumont runs on. Dylan's one, which I like a lot in terms of meaning and the play on meaning with the same word, is it's a very simple line, and it goes, it's a restless, hungry feeling that don't mean no end of good, when everything I'm saying you can say just as good. And what I love about that is that the same word is cast positively and negatively through the rhyme. Don't mean no end of good. This is a bad thing. Everything I'm saying you can say just as good. So good has both positive and negative connotations in the rhyme.
Sometimes people pick up on them as if it's a negative thing, and I think sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. But the telltale of whether it's good or not is when you don't notice it first time, because a lot of the time you hear it and it's used and you don't even clock it. I think that's kind of like the telltale of whether someone's used it well, because it feels like enough of a new word that there's a uniqueness to it.
Quite a lot of rhyme generally, I think, especially in poetry, can have the. If you read Elizabeth Bishop, who I love, I was listening to a discussion of her lately, and they were talking about one of her long poems called "The Moose," and it said, "Well, it's long, it doesn't rhyme." It was just mentioned in passing, and I'm reading it again. It does rhyme. It actually rhymes. Only not all the time. It rhymes essentially when it feels like it, but there is quite a lot of rhyme at play in the poem that you simply don't notice. The meter is so natural. It has the patterning of plain speech, but in verse.
Right, I see.
There's no grand rhyming conceit, or there's no obvious form.
That's an interesting thing as well, because since, like I say, rhyme is a limitation. So to use it in a way that you don't need it, and it still would be a poem without it, but these are used sort of like as techniques that are more like flourishes for the sake of rhyme, which, not in a bad way, but like, there's rhyme that's able to be used throughout when you don't need it, is an interesting concept. It's being used almost in a way that like assonance would be, or sibilants, or any tripartite structure, anything that's like a little flourish that you can put in. It's nice to think of that like not coming just at the end of each line going da 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 da, but using it to sort of help towards something. And I think it must be very tricky for poets who do rhyme. I was talking to someone recently about this, Crafty, who was on this show, who's does a bit of spoken word poetry as well, and he said that in the 20th century, a lot of poets stopped rhyming because it had all been done. Like most of the things he was saying, a lot of the pastoral poets were rhyming trees with breeze, and that was just all you could think of, really. And so it must be difficult to try and find either surprising rhymes, like you said earlier, like with the apostle, and things like that. You have to walk a very, very fine line between using something that you don't expect, which is good and satisfying, but also using words that are obscure and archaic for the sake of the rhyme, to try and be like, look at me, look at this word.
Well, that's it. Enforcing it, forcing the issue of rhyme by being willfully obscure or just sometimes just silly. I mean, to apply that to when I write a song, and maybe coming from folk music, folk music gets let off the hook a lot, the traditional stuff, because it's old, and people say, this is a traditional piece, has no author as such, disseminated orally, collected later, etc. Various different versions of the same song exist, and this is a venerable tradition, and so there's a temptation to people to accept that it's all good. What a body of work. Actually, a lot of those songs, just as many of those songs as any other form of art, are bad, or have clunky moments in them that people then adopt in their own right. I'm a huge, I hate nowadays in songs when I hear like people say things like, to the country I did go. I don't think people really spoke like that before. People never I did go, and then I did go
we call them I call them like Yoda rhymes. When you sort of like mess with the order of the sentence, you get it like with your face I will punch. You hear it in rap a lot, like things like that, like.
Right. Yes. Exactly. You're thinking the idea is that there, in a way, rhyme is kind of letting you off the hook. I've arranged this, but don't do it. Like there should. What I'm trying to say, I suppose, is there should be some sort of natural. Rhyme can't be a catch-all for like awkward, and not artistically awkward, but just bad syntax, you know, like, you can do syntactical wrenchings that are quite effective sometimes, but like not if it's just this clunky. There's an old, let me find the lyric maybe, there's an old folk song called Tramps and Hawkers, which is a great song. I tend to just leave this verse out when it's or a friend of mine called Andrew Calhoun rewrote it, which a lot of purists would see as tantamount to sacrilege. I tend to see as fair game, you know. It's the same song still.
Yeah.
It's an improvement. And the line is, the preceding line is, it's better than this, but it's words to the effect of, there are still many places that I would like to see. And then the next bit is, and you know, many something further lands have not been seen by me.
Right.
No one talks. Have not been seen by. These are other places.
I haven't seen. Yeah.
I haven't seen.
Yeah.
If don't rewrite that so that what's been rewritten there is syntax into a thing where you're so desperate to rhyme with it. Rewrite the whole thing. So
this is one of the things that we talk about on here a lot, is saying that, like, you know, what is king to you in of the order of things that you want to get in, you know, what is your most important thing? And it has to be clarity and context and content. Like, those must be your best things. Like, what are you thinking and what are you saying? So you know, rhyme should never trump that. It should only ever inform that. It should only ever make it, you know, give it a delivery system to the ear. You should never mess about with the clarity of what you're saying, especially when it comes to something like that, which is a simple idea and is definitely reworkable. You know, why sort of
rework? It's why writing's hard. Writing's hard, right? I mean, you know, if it were easy, everybody would be doing it, or if it were easy, everybody who does do it would be doing it well. And thankfully, lots of people don't. And you know, the rhyme's only a part of the game. If the rhyme is awkward, if you can't do, you know, maybe you need to rephrase the whole thing, maybe that whole verse,
exactly,
whole line. I'll give you an example of what I mean, perhaps by a more natural. It's true, like as you say, there's a lot of the more, especially the more avant-garde, perhaps, or the more intellectually sophisticated 20th century poets. There's a sense that rhyme is sort of old hat, and the old forms no longer have any traction. But at the same time, the best of those poets never really abandoned it outright. You always some. So let me find this poem. Certainly, Philip Larkin would have. I'm trying to find his poem, "The Large Cool Stores," and it's just taken me to a bunch of Argoses near me. Literally, Urban Outfitters, Hamleys. No, I want this poem. Here we go. Philip Larkin wouldn't sit in the company of the sort of poets I mean, but it's definitely one of the 20th century's best poets, I would say. And as soon as this poem loads up,
it's interesting. Whilst that loads, it's interesting because that whole idea and the turn of the 20th century of being sort of like, you know, one party says that rhyme is so, you know, overused and traditional and old hack, and you know, it's been done 1,000 times, and there's nothing new to say. One sort of route went to, let's just abandon it and say what we want to say. And then you have, you know, rap happening all those years later, which goes, no, let's make this more complex. Let's up the ante a bit, like as a response. Let's make this a bit more to rhyme with, so that the bank doesn't run so empty, which I think is interesting. You know, those two responses are the polar opposite. And I think that's one of the really interesting things about rap music, is that it feels like a response to traditional rap after a while. Like you really got the complexity in rhymes coming around the 90s, you know, from the early 90s. And even then it was still sort of trickling through until the late 90s, when you got people like Big L coming in who were doing multisyllabics and like that. And so it's interesting that poetry never did that to me. It's always been interesting. Like, obviously rap is designed to be spoken and performed, and so the rhymes have a lot more leeway and flexibility. But I was always surprised that you know, there was never this huge movement of let's make rhyme more complex in the way that rap does in poetry, you know, 100 years ago. It's one of those really confusing things to me why it never happened.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I need to think about that. Certainly in rap as well, like a lot of popular music, if you think about the evolution of popular music as a whole versus, say, Western classical music, it's very rapid. It's very pressure cooked. You know, it sort of goes. Up to the 20th century, epochs of classical music are just that. It takes like centuries for one mode of expression to shift into another.
Yeah, true.
With the birth of rock and roll coming out of the blues and various folk musics and whatnot, pop music is barely 100 years old, if anything.
Yeah.
All, you know, and look at jazz, the acceleration of jazz from early traditional jazz through, you know, bebop into modal playing. Like jazz evolves so fast that like a figure like Miles Davis can essentially make a lot of those changes. Like he spearheads many of the big changes in the genre. One bloke in the course of a lifetime is doing that. Essentially. I mean, it's solely him, but there's an argument to say that, you know, that's a whole different discussion. Rap strikes me as being quite similar in that sense. Like, you know, when does rap start to emerge? The early 80s again?
I think yeah, maybe early 70s, like maybe even
Africa Bambaataa and then it has its precursors in people like Gil Scott-Heron, I suppose. The revolution will not be televised, etc. But, you know, the evolution of early rap, and here's where there's a direct it's become a kind of trite and indeed kind of like well-intentioned, quite white thing for like well-meaning people such as myself to say that, well, you know, that rap is actually a kind of folk music, but it sort of is. You have the same sort of the reclamation of technologies, you know, sound systems and whatnot, the seizing of the means of production, this very organic mode of expression that is coming out of communities, seems to my mind to have been developed communally, orally, way before it was recorded. All of that is a folk process, really. And once it gets going, the evolution is so quick, it seems to me. Like, like how fast things like, which I know is sort of venerated, but you can't help now, if you listen to like Sugar Hill Gang now, it does sound so, it's a totemic piece of music in the genre.
Yeah, it
sounds so dated. I mean,
of course,
all introducing themselves, you know,
and the sort of that classic sort of dun 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 dun, that like that rhythm, and that is it's completely dated. And if you did something like that now, it's not even like that's a type of music you can go back to. Like if you did an 80s song or like a 70s feel, it's not like you can go back to that like you can in pop. You can make a you know, a pop song that has an 80s feel and it could still feel relevant.
Well, maybe you could, but you'd have to dress it up somehow. Like,
you'd have to do some clever stuff with it to make it sound a bit more. Because I don't know how you could. It is interesting, but I don't think there's a way that you could release that and do that today. It's interesting because I guess the question comes down to in rap, it's a form that was building itself at those points. That was like the building blocks of it, and that was the foundation that was laid. And so if you did that now, it would feel like you're going back, rather than in 80s. That is, the 80s is a complete sound, and then there was just a new one, rather than you know, new 80s in the 90s or nouveau 80s in the 2000s. It's like this is something that's building itself up rather than shifting to a new type. I suppose it's the difference between something like trap and hip hop, or, you know, traditional hip hop. Those kind of things
But then things do look back to look forward all the time, right? I mean, like Dr. Dre and G-Funk, he was looking back to like Sly Stone and people actually putting an actual band together, you know, and having that kind of thing. And similarly, like a lot of current pop, like the trendy kind of group like Haim, for example, who are, you know, perhaps they've had their initial moment of being like the coolest thing ever, but they also just sound like Pat Benatar from the 80s, or they're great. I mean, I really like Haim, but they sound like Fleetwood Mac, Pat Benatar. It's that kind of 80s sound. What's that song? Wilson Phillips, that kind of. So there's a lot of looking to look forward. But you couldn't. The thing with the Sugar Hill one is it's sort of it's almost the kind of, be careful how I say this, but I was thinking about it the other day actually in terms of there seems to be a tradition in rap you can watch evolve of introduction songs. A lot of Sugar Hill Gang, that song is they introduce themselves, they give their names and they say what they're going to do. And in Sugar Hill, it's very much they're kind of like rascals. They're like plucky young, like, and we're here basically to entertain you. And people forget the rest of that song goes on to be quite homophobic and unpleasant. But like, but at the start and the edited version, the single, it's what you hear is not a test. I'm rapping to the beat. I'm Wonder Mike. I'm here to. I'd like to say hello is one of the lines. Like they're quite cordial, and they've got attitude, and and it's new, and there's a kind of like street smart confidence to it. But they're there to entertain. Move that like later on. Things go west. A song like "Fuck the Police," those guys are also introducing themselves, but in a totally different way. It's we're here. This is who we are. With our experience is born out of poverty and disenfranchisement and the brutality of a ruling power, essentially. And we're not necessarily here to entertain. In fact, we're here to make and then of course
to disrupt.
The most but they do still, a badass called Ice Cube, like. They're still introducing themselves at the beginning, right? They will say their name and then who they are and their credentials.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Eminem did the same thing. Hi, my name is literally what that song is about. And what I really find interesting now, retrospectively, about that song is, and of course, Eminem has the kind of always up for discussion. I saw an article like it's called him a guest in black culture,
right?
Which that is true, but it's as true. Every white musician. Pop musician is a guest in black. I don't know why rap gets singled out. All pop music is of black origin. No blues, no rock and roll, no nothing, and that is black fundamentally.
Yeah.
So, Elton John is a guest in black culture. Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones certainly are. Bob Dylan, everybody. But just for sake of argument, then let's talk about Eminem, the white rapper, and then we're getting off rhyme, I suppose. But that song. I like his approach to that very much. He that in a way, hi, my name is. It's all about. He's not taking kind of the same kind of hard-nosed street credentials that somebody like Public Enemy or NWA, I should say, sorry, can get away with. It's really about neuroses and being and medication and being fucked up. My mom does more dope than I do, and Freudian and messy. It's not really a brag in any way.
No.
In fact, it's about being a mess.
Yeah,
and which I thought was quite a neat way around that. It did instill an introduction song, so the tradition is carried forward, but reworked.
It's interesting to think like how many things are specific to rap in that way. Like, can you imagine a folk song that had like a hey, I'm Jack and I'm here to say, like, even if you were sort of like doing it in a more traditional thing.
It comes from the blues. The blues is full of the blues has a tradition of the bragging song.
I thought, sorry,
like when Muddy Waters sings the bragging song.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The boast, the blues man's boast. When Muddy Waters sings "Manish Boy," everyone's na 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 na, and every line is just another iteration of "I'm a man." I'm a great big man. I'm a really brilliant man. Like my favorite line being, for its sort of ridiculous braggadocio quality, all you girls sitting out that line, I can make love to you, woman, in 5 minutes time. Just like, all right, mate, But they're brilliant, those songs. And that's a tradition that, like, for example, Prince picked up on really well. Like a song like Cream by Prince, where he's really singing to himself, you're the best, filthy cute, and baby, you know it. Prince's entire career, in fact, like probably the one thing that marked it was his failure to engage with hip hop successfully at all. Right. He tried, but never well, I would argue. Like Sexy Motherfucker, it's not very good, and every other attempt he does to work in rap kind of fails.
Right.
At the risk of sounding sacrilegious and God rest his soul and the rest of it. But nonetheless, he inherits that tradition from the blues of the boast. Cream is a blues singer's boast. You're the best. You've got the horn, so why don't you blow it? It's your time. Everything you do is success. Except he's singing to himself. So there's that. But yeah, I think possibly because rap was so new and it was coming from such a marginalized place.
Yeah.
And was such a kind of authentic expression of marginalized, disenfranchised experience, poor, black, urban, that it's something to be said there for the need to set up your stall immediately and introduce oneself immediately. Right, this is who we are.
Big name badge.
You know, yeah.
I think that's
anyway,
it.
Back to rhyme, maybe, or maybe not.
Well, I was just going to say, like, another because I'm just thinking mostly, you know, since you're on, I'm thinking about the differences between writing in one form and the other, and how, like, rappers kind of doing a thing where, you know, in the last 20 years, it's got a lot more poetic than I think it was before, and there are a lot more sort of elements of poetic language being used and poetic ideas and big, you know, gaudy sort of metaphors and things like that. But one of the main differences I think you find between, like, let's say pop music and rap is that a lot of the time rappers will literally just say things that they would say in everyday conversation, which sometimes in pop, not all the time obviously, but like a lot of the time in pop, that seems like something that you'd want to stay away from. Like plain speaking is usually seen better as something that you should embellish and overemphasize and exaggerate a lot of the time. But a lot of the best, you know, a lot of great poets anyway, just speak, you know, write how they speak. You know, Bukowski, for example, just sort of writes how you would kind of imagine he'd speak, much like a lot of rappers do. But is that something that you think about when you're writing as well? Like, do you think, right, I've got this idea and it's a very plain idea and I want to say this sentence, but do you have like an obligation to go, how do I make this sound pretty, or how do I wrap this up in a metaphor, or how do I do this? You know, is there something that there's an obligation to you to do it?
That's a really good question. In a sense, actually, if there is any obligation, it's the opposite. It's to get away from that. Let's say my natural tendency, I think, in writing, insofar as it resides anywhere, it resides more towards the kind of Baroque flourish, the more florid or decorative style of writing, and those are the kinds of lines and rhymes that come to me actually easier than something that's more pared down. For example, I wrote a song once called, I've actually just forgotten what the actual song is called. There's a love song I wrote, and I remember some lines just to give you an idea of what I mean. It has lines in it like, hear the red heraldic birds flash about my room. I think of you, the brightest jay, the colors in your plumes, the color in your plumes. You know, the red heraldic birds flash about my room.
Yeah,
it's not how I speak.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It's a very decorative heraldic. I mean, I've chosen that word deliberately, and it works, you know. But those lines like that come to me with comparatively easily. I mean that as a neutral statement of fact. Rather than the rest of that song has lines of that nature in it, which I'm happy with and enjoy and like. But the obligation, as I see it, is more to get back towards a much more pared down, minimalistic sort of expression, the kind that Eric was great at. So when Eric has a line like, it was a night so hot, I'd tell you if I could, how the moon set fire to the cottonwood. Beautiful, plain, stark, but the image is so, how the horses called from the riverbank and how the water boiled and how they would not drink. Bank and drink, the rhyme there is the beautiful half rhyme. Yeah, absolutely wonderful, pure, hard imagery in a way. Nothing, it doesn't need any ornamentation, anything florid in it. That's really.
I think in fact that's one of the things. A lot of people are tempted to say, you know, the more complex or the more sort of obscure the word, the better the thing, or that, you know, and that's a thing that you get not just in writing but across the board. Like the amount of, just watching MasterChef, for example, the amount of times that the feedback comes back and they say you're trying too many things and what we want is simplicity, and elegance a lot of the time comes from simplicity, and that kind of says, you know, you kind of have to get over that wall in your head that goes, no, this must look like a certain thing. You know, I can imagine a lot of people sitting down and, you know, maybe the word, for example, the word heraldic, which comes to you quite naturally in that very specific example and works. People might hear that and then go, oh, I need a word like that in mine. And you know, and then speak for a way to, again, it's forcing where it doesn't belong.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, it's all about simplicity. It's all about what you want to get.
It's also about what's best for the piece, I think. Like the piece doesn't necessarily need anything to make it so. A poem doesn't need metaphor necessarily.
Sure.
In fact, there's a tremendous misapprehension, I think, about a lot of poetry, where in the mind of perhaps the general reader, the poem is always about something that it isn't about. A poem that purports to be about a moose, say, by Elizabeth Bishop, is not about a moose. It's about the virgin birth, or race relations, or you know, the sinking of the Titanic. Something, you know, anything. But
yeah,
back to the poem is about what the poem is about. You know, you don't, and I'm very distrustful in a way of, I don't think, you know, if you manage to create a metaphor, then that's great. But the kind of idea of setting out to make a metaphor is like, this needs a metaphor is to me.
It's not like season. It's not salt. It doesn't. Yeah. It just.
I'll give you an example, weirdly, that I think I mentioned to you lately, and it's a song that I don't necessarily care for the band particularly. The song "Lippy Kids" by Elbow.
Oh, Elbow. Yeah. Yeah. I do like it.
That. I do really like that song. I find it very moving. It's a song about lippy kids on the corner again. You know, quite working class, and it's an older guy looking at that and reminiscing about his youth and the first girlfriend, I think. And that's a song there are moments in that song where I feel like that's what he's doing. He's trying too hard for ornament, for metaphor, for decoration. He even ruins his own metaphor in the first line. Lippy kids on the corner again. Lippy kids on the corner begin settling like crows. Fine. So you use a simile there with the children like crows. But in the next line, he goes into the old idea of the simian stroll. I never perfected that simian stroll. Right. Well, you've already changed from crows to monkeys. What are they?
What are they?
What are they? What are they going to be? And a lot of the rest of the song, it goes on to the best lines in that song are the simplest. There's a lovely, the verse concludes with nobody knows me at home anymore.
Yeah,
it's a lovely,
and I remember
the force of that line when it comes around. The idea that in adolescence first. In fact, it's very subtle, because the first time it comes, it's nobody knew me at home anymore. And he's talking about his adolescence, and the idea is there that, you know, you become somebody else. Yeah. When you hit that certain age, and your behavior changes, and the people at home are shocked, you know, and it happens to everybody, I'm sure. And then in the second time it comes around, it's nobody knows me at home anymore. That changing knew to knows has more of the effect if he's singing that now from the vantage point of
he's realizing again that is the case. Yeah,
changed again. And that it's such a straightforward line, but it's so much more forceful than anything decorative he tries to do in that song.
Yeah,
when it comes in, it's the crux, the emotional crux of the song is there. It's not in the florid bits.
And you said
some of the florid bits are nice, but
you said it was kind of Smithsy when you recommended it to me. And that line specifically, I thought that's a very Smiths, a very Morrissey line.
Yeah,
to the fact that it actually reminded me of a specific line. It's not not my home, it's their home. And I wanted no more. He says something like that. You know, it literally reminded me of that. And but yeah, it is a very nice song. And again, I think that line is without a rhyme as well. Nobody knows me at home anymore. I can't remember if it has a partner.
It doesn't rhyme. No. There's quite a nice rhyme in that song. He brings the again, and lippy kids on the corner again, lippy kids on the corner begin settling like crows, blah, 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 blah. And then it comes around with it was everything then, tiny background, which again is another direct. So no. So to get back to your question, no. My only obligation really is to. This sounds like a very pretentious thing to say, but it's the obligation is to the piece, to the song. What is best for the song, for the idea, and for the particular emotion or range of emotions or problem or scenario that I'm trying to convey. But if there is an obligation in terms of technique, it's really making it simpler. It's really paring it back. Just to crank this up a notch in terms of utter pretense, and not to compare myself in any way, shape, or form. But the trajectory of Samuel Beckett's work, really, if you start, he said himself that he was most interested in paring everything down to like the minima of what was required. And some of his later play hardly even applies. You get like a 30-second piece with just some breath goes across a nothingness, and that reduction of things. Obligation is a good word though, and I think just simplicity really, simplicity and eloquence at the same time. The eloquent within the elementary, that sort of thing, like that's nice. And in terms of rhyme then, like just to not, there is a tremendous temptation just to like force the rhymes to have it done. Or that's type that up now. That rhymes. Like there's some shockers. Any other day I could have pulled out a whole range of rhymes. Let me read you this poem though. This is one way I think.
Is this the Larkin one?
Yeah. So again, we're poetic form is concerned. Perhaps there's a kind of idea that you follow the metrics of it. So if you have a ballad, for example, ba-dum 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 ba-dum, and the rhyme perhaps very much every syllabic end of those lines is where the rhyme goes, and it's like there once was a man from Nantucket. What I'm trying to say is that this poem, the rhymes are so much more subtle just because of the way he lets the lines run on. It's called on a genre. The lines don't end rhyme doesn't end a line necessarily in this poem. And there are lots of poems that use rhyme more subtly and effectively. The rhyme doesn't end the line necessarily. And so I'll read it. It's called The Large Cool Store. And it goes, the large cool store selling cheap clothes set out in simple sizes, plainly knitwear. Summer casuals, hose in browns and greys, maroon and navy. Conjures the weekday world of those who leave at dawn low terraced houses, time for factory, yard and site. But past the heaps of shirts and trousers spread the stands of modes for night. Machine embroidered, thin as blouses, lemon, sapphire, moss green, rose, brine nylon baby dolls and shorties, flounce in clusters. To suppose they share that world, to think their sort is matched by something in it, shows how separate and unearthly love is, or women are, or what they do, or in our young unreal wishes seem to be, synthetic, new, and natureless in ecstasies. So the rhyme that, like, the line I think that emphasizes what I mean most in a way is you have rose rhyming with suppose, but suppose runs on to a new, so it's lemon, sapphire, moss green, rose, brine nylon, baby dolls and shorties, flouncing clusters, full stop. To suppose they share that world is how you read the next bit. So suppose.
I think maybe there was a bit where he said trousers and blouses sort of had a sort of similar relationship there.
And houses. Leave at dawn, low terraced houses, time for factory, yard and site. But past the heaps of shirts and trousers, spread the stands of mows for night, machine embroidered, thin as blouses. So that the rhyme is constantly there. It just doesn't.
It doesn't yell out at you.
It's not as end stopped. It doesn't go. The rhyme doesn't close the line off. The poem flows across the rhyme more naturally, really. And again, the speech is very. So it has the effect of not implying a rarefied or ornamental poetic language, but of simply lassoing regular speech into some sort of poetic form. Which is the greater challenge, I think.
Definitely.
Really. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite rhyme of all time? Do you have one particular, not necessarily the words themselves, but just the way they were used in a term, or maybe just literally just the words themselves? Is there one that jumps out to you that you think of?
I have a favorite rhyme of all time. Do you mean a line in which the rhyme is, or just
I guess like it can be in context, or it can be because of the way they're rhymed, or because of the context around them, or the words themselves. Anything you like, really.
Yeah. Okay. This one springs to mind. Very simple, but getting back to the idea that the culmination of rhyme can have in it the same satisfaction as a punchline or a joke. That tension and release, the tension and release, essentially. So much of music generally is about tension and release in one way, shape, or form, harmonically and melodically. So, you know, and something that most musicians, I think, on some level are thinking about. Then this rhyme is from Warren Zevon, and I think that one of the reasons I love it is because it's a sentiment and a thought of such wisdom, which is not, you don't find this kind of wisdom so much in anywhere, really. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? Wisdom's quite rare. But it's delivered, rhyme as a conveyance of it works so well because it also has the satisfaction, and you're left with both the very simple, beautiful rhyme and the thought. And anyway, so it goes. I remember the first time I heard it, it's from a song called "Don't Let Us Get Sick," and the rhyme is, the sky was on fire when I walked to the mill to take up the slack in the line. I thought of my friends and of troubles they've had to keep me from thinking of mine.
Nice.
Which is beautiful, I think, and full of hard-won compassion and humanity and a kind of resignation and sort of my. And I honestly, I don't think you quite know where he's going with it until "To Keep Me From Thinking of Mine" is delivered.
Yeah.
And it's very.
It's a nice, it's really nice sort of rug pull moment where you realize where it was going the whole time. Yeah, that is nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of just a funnier or more like a really.
I'll tell you one that gets brought up on here all the time, which is a bender who I showed you yesterday, doing the Tom Waits thing.
Yes. Oh yes.
He this gets brought up on basically every battle rapper has this as basically their favorite rhyme, and it's when he rhymed in a battle, Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, the atomic bomb designer. So he rhymed the exact.
You told me that, yeah.
Yeah, I must have told you at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one of the best ones. Saint Peter the Gatekeeper. That's a lovely one as well. Just is the job and the thing that the person is.
Yes, that's really taking the idea. That's rhyme and meaning almost to the nth degree, really.
Absolutely.
I thought of it. Tom Waits brings up, like, some of his rhymes are very funny. The piano has been drinking's got a great line, which you can't find your waitress with a Geiger counter, and she hates you and every single one of your friends, but you can't get food without her, which is nice. Which is quite good. Like, yeah, I like that one. Things like musical, like, she makes the sign of a teaspoon, he makes the sign of a wave. The poor boy changes clothes and puts on aftershave. That's a lovely one from Paul Simon, and things like unfortunately I can't. One of my favorite rhymers of all time in a way is Emily Dickinson, visionary American poet. I'm struggling to think of any of her off the top of my head, any of her most brilliant ones though. I sent one to the WhatsApp group maybe. It's probably way back though. Oh damn, that group is extensive. No, I can't summon her to mind. That's
all right. That was a good couple. You gave us a good.
Go and read some Emily Dickinson, everybody. You'll find lovely stuff in there. Yeah.
Right. I think that that about wraps it. Oh Jesus, it's over an hour. I didn't even realise that. Right.
No, we've been trying. I'm getting to the face pulling stage that I always do on these things. My face, you know, when you do this, your face is like omnipresent at the top of the screen. I'm not looking at my face for so long a time. Obviously, I'm looking at your face as well, but there it is, a constant reminder of. So after a while, I just start to. I get bored of it and I start to do that. Yeah. So
right.
That what I'm saying is that is probably a good time to wrap it up because insanity is. I did enjoy that. That was delightful.
That was very nice. I'm glad you came on. I'm just going to go through the quiz for next week.
Right.
don't try to answer these because people have got to think them. But these are
couldn't if I tried.
These are quite difficult. They're actually from the Patreon quiz, the first ever Patreon quiz. So if anyone listening wants to have more of these quizzes, then I do them every 3 days on the Patreon. There's also loads of things. I'm going through my first ever rhyme book at the moment, and sort of
nice. Is that
commenting
a little
on that.
moleskin?
Yeah, it's some of the worst trash I've ever read, and I'm so thankful that I found it. This is from 2010. And at the moment, I'm just going through and commenting on it, and it is a treasure trove of trash, and I love it. So I'm going through that at the moment on there. I'm also doing some battle commentaries and that kind of thing, looking back over old battles and other people's battles soon, and doing commentary over that. I'm hoping to get my mum on next week, actually, to watch some of them, and possibly your mum, Jack, as well.
That'd be ace.
To watch back some of the old battles. So yeah, do get on the Patreon, patreon.com/shuffle_t, and obviously buy the book, the Advanced Rhyming Dictionary, on shufflet.com/shop. There we go, that's my plug-in bit. All right, and here are the quiz questions from the first ever Patreon quiz. So if you listened on the Patreon, you'll remember these, but here we go. Right, so the first one, the rhyme is Human Rights Act, and the clue is how cults end. How cults end. Human Rights Act, which is quite a tricky one. I'll tell you these after, actually, Jack, after I've stopped recording.
I've nailed that one.
Have you?
I have nailed that. I know exactly what that is.
That's nice.
Brilliant.
All right.
I'd have these ones.
Number 2 is Kitchen Roll, and the clue is Great British Bake Off. You don't need to know the show inside out. You just need to know what the show is about and what kind of things are sometimes on screen. That's all. Right. 3 is Ticketmaster. And the clue is Australian Bay, as in B-A-Y. That might be an immediate one for a lot of people. Number 4, Stick to the Question. And the clue is Different Name and Address. Again, might be a quick one, might be a slow build. Number 5, Stinging Nettle. And the clue is Balance Bubble. That's a nice one, I like that. And then number 6 is Chicken Burger. And the clue is a computer game. All right. And then number 7, Winter Thermals, and the clue is Big Fat Famous British Bloke. That's a bit of a disservice, but whatever. Weapon of Choice is number 8, and the clue is Mythical Woman. Number 9 is Peggy Mitchell, and the clue is a type of cake. And 10 is Hair and Beauty, and the clue is Scream. Scream. All right. Thank you very much for coming on, Jack. That was an absolute delight. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, really enjoyed that.
Great chat. I'm going to stop recording now. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and be back next week with, I believe, Kruger from Don't Flop. So look forward to that. All right, everyone. Thank you. Bye. Bye then. Bye.